Hello. The Supreme Court overturned Roe v. Wade. I'd like to share a few thoughts with you about this because it's an earthquake when it comes to what we're all facing from now on. And the most important thing I want to say about it is that this is a campaign that has been going on for a very long time, since really the 20s. And this is part of a campaign to roll back all of the gains that were made for social services, for expanding human rights and constitutional rights in this country. These gains were made under the Roosevelt, FDR administration. They've been gains that have happened since that time. And ever since the late 70s, there has been this increased concerted effort to roll back all of that. All of it. Roe is just one of these things. And it's important that we all understand this. This is a major justice issue, and the Romero Institute is devoted to addressing and exposing systemic injustice and finding positive solutions. So that's why I'm addressing this today. And the issues that affect people's lives because of the overturning of Roe. Let's start with health. One, this is very dangerous. I lived in California in the 60s. I went to school in Berkeley. I know women who had abortions in Tijuana, Mexico, before Roe was in place, going to places in the dark of the night, wandering around, walking on dark streets, trying to find these places, going in and finding hair all over the clinic, and you're not at all sure whether or not these people know what they're doing, coming out of there and being handed handfuls of pills to take, which you throw up before you ever get on the plane. You don't know whether those pills were supposed to keep you from hemorrhaging, but you no longer have the pills. And I know women who couldn't have children ever because of the bleeding that took place from these abortions. That's what life was like before Roe. And then I know women who have had abortions in hospitals, in safe hospitals in the United States. Those are two entirely different worlds. What are we doing going backwards like that in our history in terms of women's health? So there's another part to the health that I think we really have to think about, and that is if you are raped or if you're a victim of incest, you are dealing with genetic issues. It's not only that you've been traumatized and disempowered and perhaps wounded or scarred for the rest of your life, you also have to be considering if you were to have this child, there are genetic issues involved. A psychopath or a sociopath or a violent person who goes around raping women may be carrying certain genetic issues that are very serious. By the same token, incest is not a good deal when it comes to genetic issues. So in addition to the personal issues involved with not wanting to have a child when you've been raped, there are also health issues. So to interfere in a woman's and her, sometimes her partner and sometimes her children's right to make a decision with a doctor about whether or not she is going to bear another child and when that's going to happen is a complete violation of the health rights of women in this country. Now, let's look at the economics. How does this affect a woman economically? This means women cannot equally participate in this economy. This economy, this culture, is way behind the other civilized cultures in the West, who have childcare programs, who have family leave when, that you're allowed to leave from your job, who have pregnancy disability leave, who have programs that support women and families and their partners, who also can participate in these programs. This country doesn't have that. And that's because there's an element a political element in this country that I call the hard right. It is not the conservatives. It's the hard right. They do not want to share any of the tax money for those kinds of programs that support families throughout our nation. They do not want to share that money. They want that money to go to the corporations, to go to the tax deductions for the elites, because then they have access to all that money instead of the people having access. So if you're in this kind of an economy where you do not have supportive programs as other civilized nations do to help with family issues and family costs that are widespread, then you're not going to be able, if you have to have another child and you already have 3, and what are you going to do? You're not going to be able to work, is what's going to happen. And so the economic violations for women of overturning Roe v. Wade are very, very serious. Thirdly, there's the whole question of privacy. We have privacy rights in this country, and they are now seriously they're now on the table for getting rid of them too. We're talking about the government definitely being in people's bedrooms now and making laws that affect what's going on in your bedroom. And you don't have the right to decide when you're going to have another person in your family and how you're going to support that person. You don't have that right anymore, nor do you have the right to make a decision with your doctor about when you're going to have a child, because it may threaten your health, it may cause you potential death, it may create very serious problems in your family if there are genetic issues. There are things to be considered here, and you may have physical conditions that threaten your life if you go forward with another pregnancy. So it's very complicated. It's not a simple thing. And the other issue we have to look at is constitutional rights. This is very serious because they are rolling things back one by one. The next thing they're going to be looking at is ICWA, the Indian Child Welfare Act. Are they going to completely overturn the only act that was ever put forth after the uprising in the 70s by the American Indian movement? The only law that came out of that entire period was the Indian Child Welfare Act, which was protecting the right of Indian children to be raised by Indian families and not just be assimilated into the white culture. And that law is now before the Supreme Court, and there's every reason to believe they're going to do the same thing to ICWA that they did with Roe, or at a minimum gut it so that it's no longer effective. In addition to that, if you look at the writings of Justice Thomas, and you see the things that he's referring to, it includes the right of same-sex marriage. It includes birth control. Because Daniel Sheehan, who is the general counsel and president of the Romero Institute, when he was at law school at Harvard in the 60s, did a lawsuit in Massachusetts that addressed the question of people should have the right to birth control because there were laws against it. And that he won that case. It was Eisenstadt versus Baird. He won that case, making it legal for people to have access to birth control. And the fact that Eisenstadt versus Baird was referred to by Thomas is a clear signal that the issue of birth control is going to be on the table as well for these right-wing judges, who 6 of them voted to overturn Roe, and 2 of them, probably shouldn't even be in there because, Trump put in two judges, and one of them would have been put in by Obama, except that the right-wing Republican leadership of the Senate refused to have a vote on Obama's person that he was nominating, and for 8 or 9 months they refused to vote on it, which kept him from being able to appoint someone. So then when Trump came in, he was able to make what would have been an appointment by Obama, and then another person had to be replaced. So here we are. We have this imbalance to the far right on our Supreme Court, and we have to realize that there will be other issues besides Roe that will be coming up now, and that we could continue to systematically lose our rights. And what is happening is, what we have to realize is there is a big push by the hard right to get as much money under their control as possible. The tax money that we pay every year is a lot of money. And the question is, how do you allocate that fairly to meet the needs of the people in the United States? And these people that are the far right, that have been working on this kind of, and believe me, I remember in the 60s who their leaders were. Paul Weyrich, Richard Viguerie, and I think his name was Timothy Dolan. These three guys were the leaders of the hard right. And at that time, they were kind of philosophical and political leaders, but they didn't have any base. They formed a base with the right wing of the religious community, on the mainly Protestant side, but also Catholics. They formed an alliance with them. Believe me, these three guys that I'm talking about, the hard right, they didn't care anything about abortion or gay rights or anything. They didn't care about those social issues, but they realized they could form an alliance with the right wing of the religious community, and they could get their hard right economic issues mixed with cultural issues that this element of the religious community was concerned about, and they formed what they called the moral majority. You don't remember that unless you're as old as I am. But they then began working together, and what happened was the hard right suddenly had a base in right-wing religious institutions around the country. And so finally, there was a way for the right-wing agenda to be moved forward with grassroots support, as well as this intellectual support that was coming from the top. This has grown to the point that we are now looking at a situation, but because of the elections and because of the appointments to the Supreme Court and other courts, we now have the courts kind of captured by hard right appointments that were proposed by the Federalist Society, which is a society of lawyers who have been working day and night now for 30 years, 20 years, to find people to get appointed and put into all the layers of our court system who are extremely, not conservative, they're right wing. And this has happened now, and Trump put in, I don't know, over 200 people into the courts, and 2 people onto the Supreme Court. This is a very serious situation. Okay, so what are we going to do about it? There's only one thing that we can do, and we have to be very clear about that. The only way that we change something that the Supreme Court is doing is through passing a law by Congress. And it's it. It's not just Congress now. It's the state legislatures. It's even the local communities, because we can see from the January 6th hearings that there was pressure put on officials at the very most local level on overturning those elections, and which were fair elections. So we have to register to vote, get everybody that we know registered to vote, particularly young people who have not registered in full numbers yet, particularly people in low and moderate income communities that may have given up a long time ago on any kind of policies helping them. We have to register everybody, and we have to vote. And we have to vote in at every single level. Vote out the right wing. Vote them out. And if they, are beholden to right-wing leaders like Trump, who lies all the time and has Fox News propagandizing his positions all the time, if that's who their allegiance is to, because the Republican Party has been captured by the right, by the hard right. I grew up with conservative Republicans. I'm from North Dakota. I grew up with them. These are not these people. The hard right is different. It's a different worldview. They play hardball. They don't care anything about the truth. They don't have a heart for the people. Maybe they have a heart for their own family and their own neighborhood, but they do not have a heart for the people. They are corporate. They want all of our tax money going to the corporations. They want to say the corporations are like people, and they should have all the rights. But listen to me. We have to understand it's the corporations that are leaving the toxic dumps in our communities and walking away and leaving them. It's the corporations that are running fossil fuel industries that are causing climate change, which could actually bring down our entire civilization. And these corporations cannot be, the theory that the right wing has is it's all trickle down. If we give the money to the corporations, it'll trickle down to everybody else because they'll create jobs. That has been debunked a long time ago. Everybody knows trickle down doesn't work. So when Trump came in and he gave the elites a big tax benefit, it didn't help any of us. It did not help people. That's not how it works. Ground up, demand side, not just supply side, but demand side economy has to also be at play. That says, oh, all the people need support on childcare. We need to have childcare programs that are safe in this country and that are affordable for people who work, both men and women. Demand side is when you respond to the needs of the people in a way that makes sense. Supply side is when you give it all to the corporations and somehow or another it's going to trickle down to us. No. So what I would say in conclusion is please, everybody wake up. Register to vote. Get everybody you know to do it. Figure out how you can participate in registration programs. Get out the vote, GOTV. Get everybody to the polls. And make sure you are voting for anybody else than the right wing. And anybody else, people who do not find themselves beholden to a person who lies and commits crimes like Donald Trump. Thank you.